Well, welcome to the Speak with People podcast. My name is Jason Raitz. I'm your host today. So great for you to be joining us. Here on the podcast, we believe that healthy communication is oxygen for our relationships and our leadership. And so whether you communicate one-on-one, on a team, from a stage, or like we are right now from behind a screen, we hope that this podcast challenges you to choose the healthy way to communicate, because when you do, it really does change your world and it really does change the world. Well, today I'm so excited because today we are diving into the importance about talking about our finances. And so often we don't talk about them and we kind of ignore them. I just actually heard someone the other day say, I can't remember the percentage, but it was an actual percentage of people who never check their bank account, never talk to their spouse about finances. So we're diving into this. And so many leaders, we even do this with organizations. We don't talk about our finances enough. And so whether you are struggling with finances, whether you're doing great with finances, we're going to talk about how important it is just to communicate with it. So does anyone really like to talk about it? I mean, some people do, but some people don't. And so why is that? We're going to jump into, the financial problems that can cause tension in relationships, and we're talking about how important giving is. And so today we just are so honored because we have a leader of just a fantastic organization who's on the podcast. And so we're joined by Darren Key, the CEO of Christian Financial Resources. We're going to dive into this conversation. He's an author of a great book called Quest. We'll talk about that more, where he challenges you to go on in this incredible journey to become financially healthy. Well, Darren, thank you so much for being on the Speak with People podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jason. It's so exciting to be here and see what you're doing with this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I just appreciate it. Well, before we jump into this, maybe you could just give us a little bit more of your background for our listeners who don't know you, your story, who you are, your family, all those kind of things.
Yeah, I'll start with the family because I've been married almost 20 years.
Wow.
And have 4 kids. Adopted my oldest son from Russia, my oldest daughter from Kyrgyzstan, and then God blessed us with biological twin girls with his sense of humor. But that's actually how you and I first got to know each other, was through our adoption. So our family started up an adoption fund, and we got to be a part of your great story too. So
just incredible.
So that's my family. And then I grew up in a little church just south of Kansas City, and a little small Christian church, about 65 people. I went to the Little Apple, that's Manhattan, Kansas, for Christian College, Manhattan Christian College.
Yep.
Have a ministry degree there, and across the street is Kansas State University, and I have a finance degree from them. While I was in college, I preached at a little tiny rural church north of Wichita, Kansas. I have 2 claims to fame. The church doubled. It went from 22 to 44 in my 3 years. Doesn't sound impressive, but there were only 100 people in the town. So I had 44% of the town coming to my church.
Wow.
And the other crazy thing is I have been ordained since 1995. I've done 13 weddings, but I have never done a funeral. So when I say that to elders, they always want to hire me, that nobody in my church ever died. So then after college, I went out to Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. I served on the finance team there. Perfect timing. They were doing a 110-acre property purchase, building a 9,100-seat worship center, and got to be a part of that capital campaign, loan, real estate transaction, got my MBA at the University of Louisville. And then in 1997, I came down here to Orlando, Florida, and have been here at the Ministry of Christian Financial Resources.
Wow. That's quite a legacy and just awesome to hear. So many things I want to just pause real quick on. So you're very excited then about Sunday night.
That's right.
With,
so
the Kansas
I don't know
City
when
Chiefs.
this is posting, but we're hoping it's a winning.
True. It will be post Super Bowl. But
that's right. So go Chiefs.
That's right. That's absolutely fantastic. Well, I didn't realize that you were at Southeast a couple years ago. I got the privilege of doing one of Bob Russell's pastor retreats. And wow, you talk about just like pouring into. There's like 6 of us, and he just, it was a life-changing thing.
He is the real deal. He's actually speaking here at the State of Florida Ministers meeting this week, and we love Bob. So
wow, it's just incredible. I just love it. And again, we adopted our son from China. You guys were a part of his story, and so he's been home now for 6 years, and just doing great. So
that's
appreciate
awesome.
All the families you guys have helped. Well, today we're talking about money and talking about finances and talking about money, and it's so hard to communicate it sometimes. So Darren, I just thought we'd jump in. Like, why do you think so many people even in households, but then leaders are also afraid to talk about or to communicate about finances.
Yeah, so our ministry has been around since 1980, and we have funded about 1,000 different projects. And what we find is so often the leaders of the nonprofits have never really been trained. You know, a lot of nonprofit leaders, whether they be churches or schools or whatever, they just never received that kind of training to understand it. But, you know, one of the things that we try to encourage them is you have to realize you're leading an organization that you have people's livelihood that depends on it, and you need to understand it. And so often I talk to pastors, for example, that they don't know what the weekly need is at their church.
Wow.
And, you know, and they need to understand that. So yeah, I think a lot of that is sometimes they don't understand it. They're intimidated by it.
Yep.
But I do feel there's a lot more resources than there used to be. And I'm more encouraged with what I see today than I did in 1997 in churches.
That's great.
There's a lot more materials out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, there's a whole lot of people who listen to Dave Ramsey. And,
Exactly.
He's got a pretty big
following.
Pretty big following, and he's pretty opinionated about it. So
Yes, he is.
people,
That's right.
yeah, we were listening to podcasts on the way here about just he keeps to those 7 steps, like he just kind of
right.
rotates. What kind of problems come up? Do you see in relationships even marriage relationships when we don't talk about the finances?
So obviously one of the critical reasons that people don't succeed in their marriage is a lack of communication, and most often it is about finances. And sometimes it's because two people came from two very different situations. One that's a spending and another that's a saving. Sometimes it's just different expectations of going in. I've seen it with personal friends and seen it as I travel the country speaking in churches all over the place, that this is a critical issue that people deal with. But once again, I think there's a lot of resources out there that people can address that with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still amazing. I mean, you think about pastors of churches or even business leaders who run organizations and not knowing some of those critical numbers.
That's right. So I have a white paper actually on our website that it's the one financial number that every church leader should know. And so one of the things I try to get elders and pastors to think about is, rather than have all these financial numbers that you maybe don't know, there's one number that's really key. It's the only number that would cause your organization to fail, and that's running out of cash.
Right.
And so if you always track what are your week's cash on hand, we would say you ideally want to always keep that above 13 if you're leading an organization. And if you do that, then you know you're okay. But if you start to see that dip, then you got to start pulling levers. That might be increasing revenues in some ways. There's different ideas we have there. Sometimes it's addressing your expense side. And so that's helped some elder meetings in some of our churches where they've said, you know what, that's a good point. We can put that on our dashboard just like we put baptisms and attendance and track that instead of everything else.
It's so important. I didn't finish, but I started an MBA when I still lived in the Chicago area, and my third class was accounting, and then my fourth class was accounting. And, numbers were tough for me. But I'm sitting in this MBA class, which it was just a riot because at the time I was a junior high pastor. Everybody in my class was a salesperson, sales executive, this. And then it gets to me. And I'm like, well, I work with students. But I'm learning these things. I mean, and some of these key numbers that leaders should know. And I thought, boy, I did not get taught this in Bible college.
That's right.
No, nobody told me that I should know these kind of things, and to put them on my dashboard so I can keep a lookout. So our ministry can keep flourishing and thriving, and be able to do those things. It's just so incredibly important. And I guess as families too, like we don't keep those numbers in
That's right. So we have stewardship steps we try to walk families through. That's the first step that we talk with families is every family, every business, every ministry needs an emergency fund. And so for families, we really think that they need to always keep 1 month in their bank checking account, and then we would say 5 months in their savings. And so that's really critical so that they know that if they lose their job or the car breaks down or there's maybe a big medical issue that they know they've got that cushion there.
Wow. Yeah, that's something. And for so many families, it's like that. I mean, it seems like such an unattainable goal to be able to do.
That's right. And what we find is that you have some things you sign up for that start hitting your credit card every single month. And when people start to reevaluate some of those, they can save money. We've had some people we've encouraged, hey, sell some things in your garage and, build up those reserves or pay down your debt. And that really is helpful.
I'm going to jump ahead of my questions here for a second, but you wrote a great book called The Quest, and there's actually a chapter on, the dragon of debt.
That's right.
And so it's just amazing, we live in a day and age where, you hear all different sorts of things about debt. Debt's good because, it helps you do this, and then debt's horrible, and then, we can't do it. But I mean, it's just amazing, how many people are just stunted from being able to move forward because of all that debt.
Yeah, so we would say in the book you'll see that there's 3 okay types of debt is how we word it, and then there's bad debt. Okay. And so we have a 3-point test we use to say, is this that good or bad? So does the item go up in value? Like potentially a house is normally going to go up in value. Are you going to borrow more than what the value of the item is worth? Oh, that's not good. Or, is it something that's going to put a strain on your budget? Because some people, what they do is they get house rich and cash poor because they get too much house. So when we put that 3-point test together, we would say there's really 3 things that we think are okay debt. So one would be an education, can make sense. Secondly, we would say that sometimes investment, business debt can make sense, like you're opening up a new store or you're buying a rental property or something like that. We think it could make sense there. And then thirdly, of course, is a house. And so other than that, and I know this is very counterculture, we don't believe in taking on debt, that if you're not paying on your credit card every single month, you should have it paid off every month. You should have your car, we believe, paid with cash.
Wow.
And so I know that's very counterculture, but you implement that principle on debt and it really will change things. And then debt will never be that bad dragon that I talk about in the book.
And the freedom when that dragon's not coming after you.
Exactly.
It's just amazing. So let's go back for a second. So we're talking about being able to communicate it. And I mean, even the marriage relationship, communicating, okay, we've got these financial goals. And so you talked about the first one being, hey, let's get some of these, funds. So we have some security, emergency fund, what other advice would you give married couples or even leaders on their own? Because I think it's amazing sometimes leaders, they try to go, wherever business they're in. So maybe they are in sales or they're in insurance. And if they're not dealing or talking about their finances, they're taking it into their workplace because they're carrying that weight. So what are some other things, some other conversations that we should be
so
having
on the
about
communication
finances?
piece, we would say the first thing is, depending on where you're at, some people need to be having that very regularly, like monthly and things like that. But so I'll give you, I do something very unique. My team here at the ministry makes a lot of fun of me. But every Valentine's Day, I get together with my wife and we sit down and we look at our entire financial situation. And so it's a kind of an annual tradition now. And so we look at every single asset we have and our loan on our house and everything. And so she understands it because I pay all the bills. And obviously I have a finance degree and an MBA. So this is my world. My wife, that's not her world. Her degree is communications. She wants to talk to people.
Right.
So we found that is very helpful for her to understand if anything was to happen to me. Okay, I've got this list of stuff, and then I put comments next to each line item, and that way she knows if something happens to Darren, hey, these are steps that I should consider taking.
Wow.
And then the other way to address that I think that makes a lot of sense is when somebody does their estate plan, whether it be a will or a trust, we like to see people also kind of put a love letter in there that says, hey, if something happens, hey, here's why I love you, but here's actual practical steps you need to take, because obviously they're overwhelmed when there's a loss of a loved one. So I think communication-wise, if you're in a situation where you have a lot of debt right now, sometimes you need to be every month sitting down together and you're talking it through and, okay, are we making progress?
Yep.
But if it's, maybe you're in a healthier situation, maybe it's an annual sit down, or maybe you're even going to go to a financial advisor and do that together.
Yep.
And then I think you need to have a plan if something happened to one of you. Hey, here's what here's what needs to happen.
Yeah. So. Well, those situations never happen. I years ago, 2009, I got a call that our house was on fire.
Wow.
And, I was like, it's probably just, whatever. And I pull in our neighborhood and there it is, flames. It was January of 2009. We lived in the Chicago area, so it's freezing. Flames coming out of every window. And at the end of that day, we lost everything. I mean, I think we were able to keep 2 totes of stuff, but we had 4 little kids at the time. Everything gone in one day. And you're standing there thinking, this is supposed to happen to me. Like those kind of things don't happen. We didn't talk about this.
Right.
And we didn't do the hard work. We were just renting at the time. I didn't know anything about I had renter's insurance, but it was
very good. It's
it was-
rare.
It's rare.
Yeah.
But it was this much compared to because we didn't have the conversations.
Right.
We didn't know. And so if our listeners like even take a couple of things just the little practical nuggets that you just gave us and just have set.
Well, that's one of the things I've been all over the country this last year. I've been doing this Quest book, and in churches speaking, what's been really neat is getting all the emails from families that actually sat down and did it together as a family. I mean, I did it with my 4 kids, and that's not child abuse. We actually took a different night, and my 4 kids, we read each chapter together, and then we talked about it. Wow. And it's so neat that, got to hear them thinking through things that, they're young, they're still not into college, but I think we're getting them on the good road right now. So
wow. So what advice, parenting wise, with, say little kids, 5 to 10, 12, right in that, any practical, communication things you should be having with your kids.
Definitely. So in the book, I talk in the 5th chapter about planning, leaving your legacy to your kids. And I think that's an area that you can really help a lot. So one of the things I do is when our kids turn 12 years old, we actually put money every month into a Bluebird account for them, and it's tied to their age, and then they have to start paying for certain things. If we go out to a restaurant and we're sitting down, if they want a Coke, they have to buy the Coke actually with their own money.
Wow.
And then they have to, if they're getting their hair done or haircut or something, they have to pay for that on their own. And so it's teaching them budgeting at a very young age. Wow. And so that's helpful. I feel really good about all my kids, where they're going to be as they get to college, been preparing for that. Second thing I really am a big fan is helping them buy their first ever stock. So at age 13, I buy them each their own stock, set them up with a custodial account at Schwab, and I buy it for them. And what's so fun, like my son, he's a junior in high school now, and it's really got him like, whoa, look, this is going up. And he's like, I'm making money. And so now he wants to buy more. And so getting him involved in that. And then I think the area we really need to teach that next generation is giving. And so I make a big deal with each of my kids when they get that first real job that's got a W-2, where they actually write the first check goes to the church that they ever make. It's the first check they're ever going to write. Wow. And I actually have the pastor even come pray with them, take a picture of it to kind of memorialize that, because to me that's a big thing that I want them to do for the rest of their lives.
Wow. Boy, that's fantastic. Well, speaking of the giving end, for many, it's just such a crazy concept. How can I get ahead financially if I'm giving to God and the church, off the bat? So just kind of walk us through what does happen through that process when we surrender, that first part.
Yeah, it's one of the few times in Scripture God says, test me in this, see if I don't throw open the floodgates of heaven. And I can tell you personally, I've experienced, and I get to lead a ministry that we have thousands of people that partner with us and hundreds of thousands of people that attend our churches, and I hear it constantly. The givers are the happiest people.
Wow.
And God has blessed so many of them with just incredible stories. And it makes sense, that God's going to want to do that. Now, is that always going to be the case? No, it's not always going to be the case. But, boy, sometimes it's in relationships. It's not just financial is the benefit. So it's really neat to see that.
So we didn't talk about this, so I'm throwing you a curveball here. But as I was a pastor for many years, one of the toughest situations that would come up with communication is if one spouse was a follower of Jesus and one spouse wasn't, and to have the conversation about giving. Like, boy, that is a tough communication piece.
It really is.
To figure out.
Yeah, sometimes the best thing in those situations is, you take the lower of the two numbers of what they're willing to do. Yeah. Or sometimes what the one spouse would do is, well, if you want to earn some other money and you want to give it away, that's your own thing. Yeah. And there's been some pretty neat stories I've seen in the years of that taking place.
Oh, that's incredible. Well, switching for a second. So if someone's listening and they lead an organization, whether a profit or a nonprofit, how important is it, to communicate or to have some system or means to communicate with your staff, your team members, or if you're a nonprofit, the people who are giving to your organization?
I think it's critical. So what we do at our ministry is, and we're a financial ministry, so we have a dashboard and we send it out quarterly. It's got 3 color-coded possibilities on it with 10 different ratios that are most important to our organization. I think every organization needs to figure out what are the key indicators for them.
Yeah.
And so I like to make it fun, and I like to make it in a way that's very clear. And so ours has a green smiley face when that ratio is in our target, yellow if at some point during the quarter was outside of target, or it's just a little bit below target. And then if it's way outside of our target, it's a red, unhappy face. And so I've had my board members come into my meeting and they say, wow, we only do 2 board meetings a year. And I feel they get that package 1 week prior. And they say, Darren, I feel like I understand more about what's happening at CFR than I do my own church, where I'm in an elder meeting that we meet constantly. But because I've got that color-coded, and we even do that with all of our policies at CFR are color-coded like that too. So everybody and we have a record that way of everything that's ever happened. So I think for any business leader or ministry leader, figuring out what those metrics are, and you may evolve over time, but then having a color-coded format where everybody kind of can see, are we winning or not, is a very helpful thing.
Well, I heard somebody say it recently. Clarity is kindness. Mm-hmm. Clarity, when you don't communicate those important numbers, everybody's just left to wonder. And you know what happens when they wonder? They talk to somebody else, and they talk to somebody else, and nobody knows what's going on. And if you're just up front with all of that and communicate it, I've heard it so many times. People would say, well, I'm not going to give money to the church because I don't know where the money goes. Or I'm not going to give that nonprofit because I don't know what it goes. I mean, how important is it for churches, nonprofits, to be
transparent.
Be transparent.
I would tell you that's we get to see a lot of demographic research on givers because of all the givers that we have to our partner ministries, and that's the future. People want to see transparency, and so they don't need to see all the detail, but they need to see some high level. Where are we at as an organization? People don't like to give to a sinking ship,
right?
But you can play that card usually once, but you can't continually play that card, and that's not a way to be successful in any organization. So I think it's very helpful if you can put it in formats that's very understandable, but transparent too.
Yeah. Do you have any tips or advice, for people who are looking to give to nonprofits? And so these are like, good characteristics of an organization that would, be a good sign to give to.
Yeah, I think, that's one is transparency, because sometimes I wish I could tell you that every nonprofit is A+ in that, but as someone that's been doing this for so many years, that is not the case.
Yeah.
And so you want to see that transparency of the financial situation. And I think that's the first thing. If you're looking at a parachurch, nonprofit, or just another charity, you can go onto like GuideStar and you can actually do research, and then some of them will even have ratings of some of the nonprofits of like how much do they spend on expenses and things like that. So that doesn't work for some nonprofits, but that is a place if you want to do a little further research.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I worked for a church years ago where once a quarter, the senior pastor it was a real simple thing, but he said, this is how much money has been given. This is how much money is spent. Here's where we're at, and it just solves so many communication problems, because I can just imagine the leaders who are a little less transparent with it, the emails that they get, and they're constantly probably dealing, because people are pretty passionate about finances and money and those kind of things. That would be, that'd be incredible. Are there any great resources that come to your mind just as we kind of wrap up our conversation, for personal financial health, places that you would recommend, and send people to say, hey, really check these out?
Yeah, so I'd encourage everybody to read the book, The Quest, and in there, you're going to hear about saving, about debt, about investing, about planning. One of the areas I talk to people, it's really a passion for me, is helping people to give more tax efficiently. A lot of people make the mistake of giving from their checking account. Most people do that. The reality is that's not the best way for many families to give. You should always be giving appreciated assets like stock. If you have those, instead of giving out of your checking account. And the reason for that is because when you have an appreciated asset, like a stock you buy that has went up in value, if you transfer that into a giving fund, you never had to pay capital gains on all those gains that you made.
Wow.
If you still like that stock, you can take the money you were about to give your charity, you can go back and buy the stock at the higher price. And now if you ever sell the stock, you're only paying it from that point forward.
Yeah.
So that is a great technique for people to use. Giving funds, they're donor advised funds. There's something that a lot of families I find as I travel the country, they have not heard about those. If they want to get more information, then go to our website at cfrministry.org and they can learn about those. But it is an incredible tool to be able to do all your charitable giving.
Wow. Boy, that's just fantastic to be able to do that. Well, this has been, I mean, I know this was kind of like a water, not a water hose, but what is it? I'm at a loss of words. Fire hydrant. You just gave us so many great, so much great financial advice and communication advice with it. And I mean, the stress load that people are carrying, can be lightened.
That's right.
If we, really are intentional and focus on this.
Exactly.
It's just amazing. Well, hey, before we let you go, just thought we'd do a little bit of some rapid fire questions so our listeners can kind of keep getting to know you. But what's your favorite financial health book? Like, do you have like a favorite that you're a go-to?
Yeah. Well, my favorite finance book of all time is a small little book called The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn. I love that book. I've given out thousands of copies of that book because I think it's what matters. It's not living for the dot. It's living for the line of eternity. And so it's a simple little book, but he's got a bigger book called Money, Possessions, and Eternity that's good too. But I really like that Treasure Principle book.
That's a great one. Do you have a favorite go-to podcast that you really enjoy?
So I listen to Carey Nieuwhof. I listen to Craig Groeschel and Clark Howard. There are three for me in my world.
Okay. Maybe a question that's going to put people at odds, but would you rather Chick-fil-A or PDQ?
So I actually like both and eat at both regularly. I guess I'm a good politician here, but I would say I eat at Chick-fil-A the most being on the road because PDQ is not as much. I actually like PDQ though. So. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Darren, and we'll put all the stuff in the show notes, but where can people find you, more information about what you do, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, go to cfrministry.org and you can email me at darren@cfrministry.org. See me on social media too there at Facebook and things.
Fantastic. Where can they pick up the Quest?
Yeah, so they can get the Quest to go to Amazon or any other place that you want to get it. I haven't recorded an audiobook. I keep debating whether to do that. So right now it's still just in printed form.
Okay. If I get a vote, yes, you should, because there are a lot of people who listen to it. But and we'd love to give one away on the podcast as well. So follow us on social media, and it's just an absolutely fantastic book. Well, Darren, thank you so much for this time. And really look forward to, what's going to come and the conversations that are going to help people through this.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for all you're doing, Jason, helping people improve in their communication.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you again for being a part of the Speak with People podcast. Just a couple of announcements before we leave. Hey, if your organization is struggling with communication, one of the things that Speak with People does is we do a healthy communication assessment. So you're able to know exactly where your people, your staff team are when it comes to them being able to really communicate freely. And so we come alongside of you and teach some principles so they can speak with and not at each other. So if you're interested in that, just email Jason at speakwithpeople.com or go to speakwithpeople.com, and we'd love to get you more information about that. Thanks again for being a part of the podcast. Every single review, every download just means the world. Again, this podcast exists because we believe healthy communication is oxygen for relationships, and when you grab hold of that, your world really will be better. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week on the podcast.